friends, it's Gloria and welcome back to another video. You asked and here is my response. I am going to be talking about 30 historical fiction books that will be released in 2025. A few have already been released, but they're popular enough that I want to mention them. Towards the middle of December, I actually made a anticipated releases video talking about 10 books that I want to read in 2025, and I only had like 2 historical fiction on there because as I was doing my research, I didn't really find any that intrigued me. A little bit of time has passed, so there's been more news of books being released, and even then, I'm gonna be honest, even then, there's very few that I actually have a strong desire to read. The more I'm learning about myself is that I should probably stay away from newer books and dive more into backlist as well as books on my shelves. It's kind of a bit of a project of mine this year, is just to read more from what I already own, not necessarily always gravitate towards the new ones. And specifically when it comes to historical fiction, my favorite genre, I'm just feeling like there's not that much out there this year that's coming out, at least from what I know so far. I only could really do research up through July. Any historical fiction that's really coming out from August to December of 2025 is just not really out there that I could find with the limited research time that I have. But I'm gonna mention 30 books that are coming out by popular authors that I think will be popular on all the big lists and the Goodreads Choice Awards that people will be reading and raving about this year. And I'm sure many of you actually want to read a lot of these books. So it's more of just me sharing the news, not necessarily me wanting to read these personally. But of course, as I go through each book, I will mention why I might read it, why I might not, and some that I definitely won't, but maybe you want to, because they're authors I know people love. So without further ado, let's get into the books. These will be in publication order, again from the best of my ability of researching. So starting with January, a book that was already released, The Stolen Queen by Fiona Davis, a very beloved popular author that I've yet to read from. I owned I think 3 or 4 of her books and I got rid of all of them except for one, the one that sounded the most intriguing to me. I don't know why I haven't read her yet, but I'm not super gravitated towards picking up her newest book. Don't know what this one's about, and I won't know what a lot of these are about, but I do know that all of her books are set in New York City around a particular building and the events that unfolded in that usually historic building. I own The Chelsea Girls and most interested in reading Lions of Fifth Avenue because that's about the New York Public Library. So this one I'm sure is on many of your radars if you're a historical fiction fan and read Fiona Davis and are familiar with her books. You probably already have maybe even picked this one up, but I personally don't have a desire to read this one. I need to start with one of her books that I already own first before I pick anything new of hers up that would excite me. Moving on to February, the book Harlem Rhapsody by Victoria Christopher Murray is one on my radar. I'm not sure if I'll be reading it anytime soon, but I did recently see Denise from Larissa Reads give it 5 stars. This is the author or co-author of the book Personal Librarian. So if you really like Personal Librarian, you might really love Harlem Rhapsody. Another huge author that many of you love and a few of you might not is Marie Benedict, and her newest book is The Queens of Crime. Now, I'm not an Agatha Christie gal, so I'm not gripping to get my hands on this one, but I know so many booktube people are and so many of you are Agatha Christie lovers. This is a book if Agatha Christie and Dorothy Sayers, the 2 mystery queens in the UK, came together, maybe get a friendship from them. Not entirely sure on the details, but I know many of you have this one on your anticipated releases, so it's already out. Let me know if you've read it, if I should pick it up or not. I do have the listening copy of it. I got an advanced listening copy from Macmillan Audio and I haven't quite picked it up yet, but this one is likely to be read because I actually own the book and I do want to get through all of my advanced copies of books that I've received, so potentially interested in this. I don't really know anything about Dorothy Sayers or much of Agatha Christie's life, except that she's just such a prolific mystery author. I did read my first Marie Benedict in 2024, surprisingly liked it, and she does focus, I think most of her books, on well-known female figures, so this might be a good one to pick up for March for Women's History Month. This next one has to be one of the most beautiful covers in this bunch of 30. Historical fiction is just, oh, there is some rough, cheesy, terribly designed covers out there. If you know anything about me, I'm quite harsh when it comes to my cover design, especially in historical fiction. Unfortunately, I feel like this genre just gets terrible cover design, but this one is an exception to the rule. Junie by Erin Crosby Eckstein. All I know is that it is about Civil War, coming of age, and it does have some magical realism. So if any of those 3 themes are buzzwords for you, pick this one up, but it's beautiful. I don't personally think I'll be picking it up unless I hear rave reviews because magical realism, I really don't think it's for me. There's some exceptions to the rule, but in general, I kind of stay away from those books. And also coming of age, not a total buzzword for me. I can kind of take it or leave it. But I think that many of you love those themes, so this could be one to keep an eye out for. Another huge author that I have written off that I won't ever be picking up again because I really did not get along with her writing, that is Pam Jenoff, and her newest release is Last Twilight in Paris, and I believe this is a World War II Paris novel. I don't know any details, but I know many of you absolutely love Pam Jenoff, so if you weren't aware, she is coming out with a new book, so you can pick that one up. I personally won't be reading it. Okay, next, coming out at the end of February in just about a few days, is Maya and Natasha by Elise Durham. This one caught my eye because the cover, again, is different than your typical historical fiction, and it is set in Russia, which I love a good book about Russia. So this one is a debut novel. It's mainly set during the Cold War era. This is about two twin sisters who are ballerinas. So if you love books about sisters, ballerinas, and dancing, the Cold War, Russia, this one I'm really intrigued by. Towards the top of the list of actually would probably pick up if I hear some good things about it. So we'll see. The next one also deals with a theme and a time that I think many people love, and that is the Titanic. It is called The Lost Passenger by Frances Quinn. This is about a woman and a son starting their life anew after surviving the Titanic. So I don't know how much of the book is actually set during that Titanic sinking and whatnot, but these two survive and then it's their life afterwards, and there's some, you know, secrets along the way. It could be a really interesting Titanic book. I know that's kind of a theme that many people love reading about. I've only read, I think, one or two. Always up for reading more, so I'm intrigued by this one. I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for it if it gets any buzz. The next one, and the last one in the month of February that is coming out very soon, is The Sirens by Amelia Hart. She wrote Wayward, which people freaked out over, and absolutely love that book. I have zero desire to read Wayward and zero desire to read The Sirens, again because of the magical realism fantasy component, and I know that there's like a bajillion timelines in Wayward. I don't know if The Sirens has that or not. Multiple timelines is not really my go-to, but if you absolutely loved Wayward and want more from that author, then pick up The Sirens. I think this one will be really huge this year. I'm sure it'll be towards the top of every list if it's well received. Next, moving into March, and an author I know many of you absolutely love and will 100% be picking up. Like I said in my 25 books I want to read in 2025, I'm gonna keep an eye out on this book and this author, but I'm gonna read more from her backlist this year. I'm talking about Susan Meissner and her newest book, A Map to Paradise. Now, the reason why I'm not immediately gravitating towards picking this one up is because I don't love a Hollywood set book. So I think this follows with an actress who's canceled and she lives in Malibu and it's her story. I'm sure it's still gonna be good because it's Susan Meissner, and I read a book of hers I absolutely loved, and I read a couple others that were pretty good. So I think this one will be good, but I want to read a couple of her backlist books this year. I'm prioritizing that over her newest release, but I am excited to see people reviewing it and hopefully really loving it. A book that I think I will 100% be reading because I really liked We Were the Lucky Ones is Georgia Hunter's newest book, One Good Thing. I put it on my list of the 10 books I do want to read in 2025, so I really hopefully it will get read. All I know that it is set during World War II in Italy, so when I'm in the mood for that, I hopefully will be picking this one up. Very intrigued to see how it's gonna go. Next in March is an author that is very beloved. I know many of you really rave about her, and that is Susan Kearsley. Her newest book is The King's Messenger. This actually was already published in the UK, but it's coming out in March in the US. It's an author that I need to read. She's on my winter TBR list because I want to read The Winter Sea, probably one of her most famous books that I keep hearing about. She's often compared to Diana Gabaldon if you're familiar with the Outlander series and love that. Her books I think are almost always set in Scotland. This one is no exception. It's 1613 Scotland. It's a romance. I need to get to trying this author, but before I pick up The King's Messenger, I need to read a book actually owned by her, and that is The Winter Sea. Another really beloved author, maybe a little bit more in the literary fiction historical sense, is Emma Donoghue. I read her book Room, which I absolutely love. That one I feel like it's a little bit different than what she usually writes, but love that one. And then I also read The Wonder by her and hated it. So I am not totally gravitated towards picking up this book by her, but I know many of you love her writing, so maybe you want to. Her newest one is called The Paris Express, and this just looks like it's a bunch of different people on a train, and maybe their stories, how they come together, their backstories, maybe a mystery. I don't know the details, but if you love Emma Donoghue, she has a new book coming out, so maybe pick that up. The next one coming out in March is The Jackal's Mistress by Chris Bajalian, or Bahalian, I don't really know how to say his name, but he is quite a prolific author. I feel like he's written tons of stuff and all kinds of different historical genre things. I know there's a book about a witch that he came out several years ago that got really huge in the thriller horror reader group of people, and I own one book by him, The Midwives, which I do have on my shelf that I want to read in winter, so we'll see if that gets read in the next month. But his newest one is The Jackal's Mistress, and this is a Civil War love story inspired by a real story, and it is about a Confederate soldier's wife finding a wounded Yankee soldier and taking care of him. So an enemies to lovers, maybe star-crossed lovers. I really hope her Confederate soldier husband is dead and it is not a story of infidelity, because that's not my jam, but it sounds like an interesting love story, and I haven't read too many books set during the Civil War. Next and last in March is The Story She Left Behind by Patty Callahan Henry. Many of you are loving her as an author. Her most popular book is probably Once Upon a Wardrobe. People love that one. I thought it was just okay. And I most recently just hauled the storybook of Flora Lee. So I want to read that one first before I even get to this one, but I think if you love Patty Callahan Henry and read her books recently, she has a new one and I'm sure that you'll like it too. Moving into April, I have The Eights by Joanna Miller. This is a debut novel. I mentioned this in my 10 books I want to read in 2025 when I talked about anticipated releases. As I was doing my early research, this one kept popping up, and so I requested a NetGalley. I got the ARC approved, and I'm actually currently reading this book. It's my nighttime reading before bed. I got stalled a little bit by reading a different book, but I'm back to this one, and it is primarily a story of female friendship, some of the first women that were students in Oxford after the First World War. So this is the interim war period. People are reeling after the First World War in the UK, and it's just set in Oxford. It follows these women and their different lives, their different backgrounds, their different secrets, their friendship, and how they get on with being some of the first females in the school that's so male dominated and they're not quite accepted yet. So it's quite a feministy friendship book so far, and I'm liking it. We'll see how it all wraps up. Another one that I think has a beautiful cover, and I think many of you will want to read this one. It is Happy Land by Dolan Perkins Valdez. She wrote Take My Hand. That one's on my TBR. I do want to read that one. So many of you love Take My Hand. I've heard nothing but rave reviews about that book. This one is set in the North Carolina, Appalachia area. Seems like it has to do with family secrets, learning about family history kind of thing. I'll be keeping an eye out on this one, but I do want to read Take My Hand first because that is her book that has stood the test of time a little bit. People are still reading it and loving it. Another popular author for a very beloved book. I feel like The Henna Artist became the book of book clubs if it came to historical fiction. Alka Joshi's newest book though is 6 Days in Bombay, so it's also set in India. That's all I know, but if you really love The Henna Artist and like her writing, then she has a new book coming out. I don't think it'll be a series like The Henna Artist is. I think The Henna Artist has 3, maybe 4 books in the series, but 6 Days in Bombay seems like a standalone. I personally don't have an interest in reading this one or really Alka Joshi because I just have not heard amazing things about The Henna Artist and don't really have a desire to read a historical fiction series like that. So I won't be picking this one up. I don't really have a desire to, but like I said, if you liked an artist, then maybe you'll like this one too. Another author and book that I will not be picking up, but I think will become huge this year, and that is The Amalfi Curse by Sarah Penner. She became huge because of her debut release, The Lost Apothecary, and people absolutely love that book. It was towards the top of the charts in historical fiction of that year. I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, and I read it and I really did not like that book. I just was flabbergasted at the popularity of it because I thought that was such a bad book. My unpopular opinion, because I know so many people love it. So if you love The Lost Apothecary, maybe consider picking up Amalfi Curse. Looks like it also has the magical realism fantasy elements of it. Yeah, like I said, I won't be picking it up, but maybe you want to in April when it comes out. Next one is a little bit different. I feel like it's out of the comfort zone of this list, and that is The Pretender by Jo Harkin. This is definitely more, I think, leaning on the lit fic side of things. This I have zero desire to read, like at all. Like I will not be picking this one up because this is quoted or said to be for fans of Hilary Mantel and Maggie O'Farrell. Now I read one and hated it and DNF'd the other. So I DNF'd Wolf Hall, not interested, and I thought Hamnet was fine. I was just not a fan of those two, but I know both of those books are loved. If you're a fan of both of those authors and those books, then this one I think could be right up your alley. It's set in the 1480s during the Tudor time period. So if that sounds like your jam, maybe pick it up. Next, moving into the month of May and its releases, this next one, I think, besides maybe Junie or right up there, is the most beautiful book cover of this bunch of 30. I just think it's gorgeous, and that is My Name is Amelia Duvall by Isabel Allende. In general, what I've noticed actually from her most recent releases is that whoever is designing them is doing a fantastic job. I just think this is so beautiful, like the clouds and the colors, and you know, I don't always love people on the cover. This is like a beautiful historical fiction book. Clearly, I have so much adoration for this cover. Again, it's just because historical fiction covers can be so bad, but this one is good. Besides the cover design, I know that it's set in San Francisco, and it is about a young woman who wants to be a writer and a journalist, and it's her story. I read Violetta in 2024 and I liked it okay. It wasn't my favorite read, and I'm not dying to pick up more Isabel Allende at the moment. I do want to try her again to see how I fare with her writing. I own A Long Pedal to the Sea, so I think I start with that one before picking this one up. But if you're a fan of her and you love beautiful cover design, maybe pick this one up. Speaking of atrocious historical fiction cover design, here's an example for you. Austin at Sea by Natalie Jenner. I mean, so ugly. I'm sorry, so ugly. But for all you Jane Austen fans out there, here's another one. She wrote the Jane Austen Society, which I actually have on my shelves, but I'm not reading it because I think it has spoilers in it for all of Jane Austen's books, and I still have Mansfield Park and Northanger Abbey to read. So I'm waiting to finish Jane Austen's novels before picking up that book. And this is another Austen-esque book. I think from my understanding, it has a long lost relative of Jane Austen on a ship crossing the Atlantic Ocean into US, and also Louisa May Alcott is a main character. So it's like a bookish type of book, and maybe different authors getting together on a boat on an adventure in the sea. I don't know about the details, but if you're an Austen fan, maybe keep an eye out for this one. Next, coming out in May, is The Lady's Road Guide to Utter Ruin by Alice Goodman. This is the second book in the Ill-Mannered Ladies series of books. Now, I haven't read the first one, so I don't plan to read the second one, but I'm still keeping an eye out on the first one because it intrigues me. It's a historical mystery, maybe historical romance, or just historical book that I've heard kind of good things about, so I'm keeping my eye out. But this is the second in the series, so if you love the Ill-Mannered Ladies book, then there's a second one out for you that you might want to pick up. Quite a few books coming out in May. The next one is The Martha's Vineyard Beach and Book Club by Martha Hall Kelly. She is most well known for her book The Lilac Girls, which I read and I thought was just okay. I had no really desire to continue on in the series or read any of her other books, but I know they're quite popular, so if you're a fan of her as an author, know that she has another one coming out. This next one I think I'll actually pick up. I'm intrigued by because it is set where I live, and that is The Girls of Good Fortune by Christina McMorris. It is set in Portland, Oregon in 1888 and has to do with the Shanghai tunnels and the anti-Chinese movement. I'm curious about this one because it has to do with local history where I'm from that I'm just not fully aware of, and I believe she's a local to me author. I have one other book of hers on my shelves that I want to read. It's called The Bridge of Scarlet Leaves, so I hope to read that one first because it's just been on my shelves forever, but I'm keeping my eye out on this one because it sounds pretty good. Next, we have The Elopement by Jill Hornby. Now, she wrote Godmersham Park and Miss Austen. Both of those books I've seen around. You know, I think they're semi-popular for those that love a book set in the UK, historical one. I'm definitely most intrigued to try Miss Austen because it has to do with, you know, Jane Austen. But if you've read from before, you might enjoy this historical romance. I don't know no details, but I think the cover's kind of cute. All right, so moving into June, this next one I will definitely not read because I don't read any of the Taylor Jenkins Reid's books. Not after the Evelyn Hugo book. I did not like that one. I have zero desire to read her books. I feel like they're always about unlikable rich people. I don't know if that's correct, but I don't care about tennis. That's what her previous books were about. And I don't really care about astronauts and space. That's not a theme that I'm intrigued by at all. This one is set in the 1980s with female astronauts in the NASA program, and I can guarantee that this will be one of the top books of the year. If it won't be in first place, it'll at least be in the top 3 of the Goodreads Choice Awards in historical fiction. So I won't be picking it up, but let me know in the comments if you will be. Another author that I actually really like, that I want to read more from, but I don't have any desire to read this book, and that is Before Dorothy by Hazel Gaynor. Now, Hazel Gaynor wrote The Last Christmas in Paris, and I loved that one. I own another Hazel Gaynor, The Lighthouse Keeper's Daughter, I think. I will be planning to read that one if I'm gonna pick up another one by this author. But Before Dorothy has to do with The Wizard of Oz, and I have zero interest in The Wizard of Oz. I could care less. I think the movie is stupid and I don't get it. I don't like Wicked. I don't have any positive feelings towards Wizard of Oz. I don't have anything against it if people like it. I just could care less. It's just not a theme or topic I'm interested in at all. I feel like I had to watch the movie in like high school and I just completely didn't understand why people liked it. Not my jam, but I know many of you love Hazel Gaynor, and if you also like The Wizard of Oz, you might like this one. Another unpopular opinion of mine is that I don't love Kristen Harmel. Many people love her as an author. She's very big in the historical fiction space, and her newest release in June will be The Stolen Life of Colette Marceau. I'm assuming that's French. I had really bad luck with one of her books, and it sort of soured me from ever trying to read her again. And I just don't think that I'm gonna get along with her writing, but so many people love her. I mean, the Book of Lost Names and The Paris Daughter, so many of her recent releases just get so much love. 5 stars all around. So I'll be curious to see how people will be receiving this one, but I'm gonna be honest, I don't really have a desire to pick it up. My last 2 coming out in July. So The Lies They Told by Ellen Marie Wiseman. I also read a book by this author and I didn't like it. I think it was The Lost Girls of Willowbrook. It had to do with twin sisters in an insane asylum being treated horribly. Really didn't like it, but I know many people absolutely loved it. It was our group read for Historathon 3 years ago. So many people loved it, so I'm letting you know that she has another book coming out, and this one has to do with eugenics, and it's set in the 1930s in Virginia. So if those are themes or places that you're interested in reading, or if you're familiar with the author and loved her previous book, then you might want to think about picking this one up. And lastly, one I do plan on picking up because it was also in that anticipated releases video that I already made, How to Lose a Lord in 10 Days by Sophie Irwin. I love Sophie Irwin's books. I think they're a lot of fun. It's historical Regency romance type of story, and I definitely will be reading this one. I just think it's gonna be a good time and love to sprinkle that into my reading now and again. So those are the 30 historical fiction books that I decided to feature in this video. And many of these I won't read, have zero desire to pick up even, but I made this video for you. So you please tell me, what books are you intrigued by? What authors do you want to read from? Please tell me down below. I would love to hear which ones sound intriguing and interesting to you that you actually want to pick up. I think there's maybe like between 5 and 10 books on this list that I'm genuinely interested in and kind of keeping an eye out for, and at least 3 or 4 I think I'll read for sure, but the others maybe not so much unless I'm convinced. So I will be excited to see how these books are received, which ones will become popular and buzzy, and yeah, any of your thoughts are welcome down below. Thank you so much for watching this video, spending some time today with me, and I will see you in another one soon. Bye.